Airstrikes have been carried out on the Venezuelan capital, Caracas,
A surprise US military operation
against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolás Maduro. President Donald Trump ordered those strikes.
On the night of January 3rd, the US illegally invaded Venezuela. In a swift nighttime raid in the nation's capital of Caracas, the US forces managed to kidnap the nation's de facto leader, Nicolás Maduro, and his wife, effectively decapitating the country's government. The next morning, Donald Trump justified that this invasion had to be done to stop drug flow from Venezuela into the United States. And he declares that for the immediate future, the US will be taking control of the country until a new government that they approve of is in place, effectively forcing a regime change through military means. But as with most US-led regime changes, this conflict is not nearly as simple as it seems. And while we can't be 100% sure about what the exact intent of the US was when conducting this attack, I want to take a look at what the hidden incentives might be, and how this invasion could provoke and spiral into an unpredictable escalation on the global stage. Okay, so let's quickly catch up to speed here. So officially, at first the US was sending out warships into the sea to combat drug cartels smuggling drugs into the United States, using these little fishing boats like this one here.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat.
More than 30 strikes on these boats have been conducted already, with more than 100 people killed. Though of course, there are some doubts about how many of these boats were actually used for drug trafficking, and how many might be innocent civilian fishing boats being blown up without the proper confirmation. Meanwhile in Washington, Donald Trump was issuing threats to the president Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela. He called for an end to Maduro's rule in Venezuela, accusing him of working directly with the drug cartels of the country that are poisoning America. And so Maduro says, okay America, if the problem is the drugs, why don't we work together on combating the drug cartels and resolve this problem together? In public rallies, he starts calling for peace instead of war, trying to convince the Americans he could become a reliable ally in the battle against drugs. But as we saw on January 3rd, it was never the intention of these warships to simply shoot down some drug boats. Not really. Because in the dead of night, surrounded by explosions and gunfire, American soldiers invaded Venezuela and kidnapped the President Maduro and his wife Celia. Maduro has already been charged with narco-terrorism as well as gun charges and is facing the courts in New York only a couple of days after being captured. So clearly, the current administration cares a lot about the drugs flowing into America. I mean, kidnapping a sitting foreign president from his own home in the middle of the night? I mean, come on, that's kind of insane, right? Well, the only problem is that this whole war on drugs justification starts to fall apart when you realize the fact that only a month before this attack, Trump went and pardoned the ex-president of Honduras, who was literally convicted of trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine into the United States. And he even said, and I quote,
"If somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life."
And so it makes you think why Trump would care so much about getting Maduro when at the same time he pardons an already convicted drug trafficker responsible for huge amounts of drugs flowing into the US. No, to see what's actually happening here, we're gonna have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So if it isn't drugs that the US cares about, what is it? Well, the most common assumption is, of course, oil. Good old America invading other countries for their oil, am I right? After all, Venezuela does currently hold the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And not only that, they have tons and tons of gold and silver as well. Materials that Trump has already said they're gonna take control of. And they're ready to fight for it as well.
First attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually.
Now it's worth mentioning that everything with this oil that Trump wants to take is not actually going so smoothly, because it's heavy crude oil, which takes a lot of work to even get it refined, as well as the fact that the country has really bad infrastructure in the oil sector, and some of the US oil executives that Trump was counting on are already being skeptical about the whole thing.
If we look at the legal and commercial constructs and frameworks in place today in Venezuela, today it's uninvestable.
So these precious resources are of course a large reason why the US invaded. But an even better question would be, what do they need all this oil for, and why now? To understand this, we need to look at America's future plans of conflict. And conveniently enough, it seems like Donald Trump has already laid some of them out for us. In the same speech after capturing Maduro, Trump made sure to mention that his administration will be adopting a new version of the Monroe Doctrine into their national security strategy.
Monroe Doctrine, we sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen.
For context, the Monroe Doctrine is a foreign policy first started 200 years ago that calls for the United States to intervene in the politics of the Western Hemisphere in exchange for the European powers leaving the USA's backyard alone and focusing on their own continent. And Trump is not wasting any time. He's already publicly hinted that Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, and Greenland will be next on his list, showing that he might be planning to destabilize the region even more if they don't follow all of his demands, leaving everyone guessing what will come next. There's a lot of debate in society right now on whether this invasion was justified. On one side, there's people saying that it's a great thing that Maduro is finally out. After all, most experts will agree that his presidency was illegitimate, and he did ruin millions of people's lives by mismanaging the country and sending it into economic freefall. And people online, especially the millions of people who left Venezuela after it completely crumbled under Maduro, are expressing how happy and glad they are that Donald Trump has now, quote-unquote, liberated the country. But at the same time, I think it's important to see this aggression for what it really is. While Donald Trump will say that they did this to protect the American people and that they were merely acting on an arrest warrant for Nicolás Maduro, it's hard to ignore the fact that at the same time, Trump will pardon the ex-president of Honduras when he's convicted of essentially the exact same crimes. Or what about gladly hosting the Prime Minister of Israel or the President of Russia when both are actively wanted by the International Criminal Court for alleged war crimes and genocide? And I know it's an ongoing joke that international bodies of law like the UN hold no actual power, and who even cares what they say, right? But when the international law is violated by the leading country of the world, the United States, it's inviting everyone else to do the same. Countries like China, for example, who are constantly in conflict with many of their neighbors, are watching the situation very closely. Because if there isn't enough international outrage, it tells them one thing plain and simple. Blatantly overthrowing a country's government with military force is acceptable in the 21st century. And so, why shouldn't they try to do the same? To keep their place in the international order, they will feel an obligation to adapt to the new rules of the game, leading to more instability, more conflict, and more war. History shows us that when you try to force a regime change in a foreign country, it almost always creates a power vacuum, which can lead to multiple groups trying to seize the opportunity, only to end up in an endless battle of death and suffering. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, perhaps most famously in recent years in the outcome of the war in Iraq, which, by the way, I've made a whole video about linked in the description if you want to learn more, but spoiler alert, it didn't end well for either country. And looking at the situation now in Venezuela, we can draw some very clear parallels to the Iraq War, only this time the official reason is drugs instead of weapons of mass destruction. The same Iraq War, by the way, which Trump was denouncing in election campaigns.
So, let me just tell you, obviously the war in Iraq was a big fat mistake, all right?
And if it couldn't get any worse, none of this was approved or even voted on by Congress. And while the current administration doesn't want to call it an act of war,
well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country, okay? We're going to kill them, you know? They're going to be like dead, okay?
So what do you call flying in with tens of military helicopters, kidnapping another country's president, and installing a new president that agrees to all your demands? I feel like there's gotta be at least one act of war in that list. Due to this whole new foreign policy of the United States, I think we will continue to see aggression and uncertainty grow in the world in the coming years. Because American imperialism is back, and it's back in a big way. No longer is it trying to hide its intentions, and rather adopting a worldview where, as long as you have the military power to back it up, you can do or take whatever you want. Manipulate and shape the globe in your favor through military force. And it's a very slippery slope as soon as other great powers start acting the same. A slippery slope that could pull us straight into World War III before we even realize it. Alright, and did I mention that they were supposed to present the explanations for all of those redactions of the Epstein files on the same day they invaded Venezuela? I'm sure that was just a coincidence though. Good luck out there.